An eerie night saint. Mara's General Hospital was one of the oldest in the city. The 100-year-old building seemed to be shrouded in shadow even during the day, and at night, it felt truly spooky. The long corridors, the strange sounds of the old elevator, the smell of damp walls, everything about the hospital seemed wrapped in a strange mystery. Martin Gray, a 45-year-old businessman, was admitted to that very hospital due to diabetes and a few minor health issues. Doctors had advised him to stay for a few days for observation. At first, everything seemed normal. His wife, Lena, visited him daily. Nurses gave him insulin injections on schedule, and the on-duty doctors often checked his reports. But on a stormy night, Martin suddenly vanished from his cabin. Namely, the night shift nurse was the first to notice when she went to check on the patients early in the morning. Seeing Martin's empty bed, she first thought he might be in the restroom or walking in the ward, but the restroom was empty, and the corridor was deserted. Jet footage was checked, and that's when the strange thing was seen. At 2:43 a.m., Martin's room door opened, but no person was seen coming out. Only a faint light flickered. Then the camera went blurry for a few seconds. When it cleared up again, the bed was empty. It was as if he had disappeared into thin air. This news sent shockwaves through the entire hospital. Doctors, nurses, security staff of Irion looked on in fear and astonishment. Even the hospital's old employees said they had never heard of such an incident before. Martin's wife, Lena, rushed to the hospital in the morning. Her cries seemed to shake the hospital walls. Where did he go? How could you lose a patient? The doctors scrambled to find an explanation. The police were called. An investigation began, but the sick footage only deepened the mystery, because Martin was last seen alive in his cabin on the 4th floor of the hospital. After that, there was no trace, no sound, no witness. But that was just the beginning of the story, because right after this incident, a strange game began, a game where past secrets, the dark history of the hospital, and a series of disappearances began to get intertwined. The beginning of the investigation after Martin's disappearance, an unusual tension had taken hold of the hospital. The night shift doctors exchanged nervous glances, the nurses shivered with fear, and the security guards were stunned. It was as if an invisible, pent-up restlessness swirled inside the entire building. The police arrived by 4 in the morning. They were led by Detective Daniel Harris, a well-known and experienced investigator in the city. He was a calm, slow, and level-headed man. As soon as he arrived at the scene, he took a moment to survey his surroundings. The damp smell of the morning still lingered in the hospital corridors. Daniel's first request was to see the seed footage. In silence, everyone watched the footage intently. The clock stopped at 2:43 a.m. Martin's room door slowly opened, but no person was captured by the camera. The screen flickered for a few seconds, then the bed was empty. A crease formed on Daniel's forehead. He leaned back in his chair and slowly said, "Someone opened the door, but there's no one here." Was the camera intentionally jammed? A member of the department said, "Sir, the camera is perfectly fine. We've never had a glitch like this before. It was only blurry for those few seconds." Daniel bit his lip and remained silent for a while. Then he went into Martin's room and observed. The bed sheets read messy. The stand was neatly arranged. Only near the window were faint scratch-like marks, as if someone had run their hand across the glass from the inside. Lena was still crying. She clutched Daniel's hand and said, "You have to find him. My husband would not go anywhere on his own. He was very weak. Please do something." Daniel nodded. "Don't worry, Mrs. Bray. We will find him. But you may have to be prepared for some hard truths." He then asked for the hospital's old records. The staff interviews began. Nurse Emily, who first discovered Martin's disappearance, said fearfully, "Sir, I don't know if I should say this, but I often hear strange sounds at night, like footsteps in the corridor, or whispering. Sometimes I feel like patients suddenly wake up in their sleep and stare into the void as if they are talking to someone. Daniel stopped her. These could be superstitions, but write everything down anyway. Next, the old hospital guard, Mark, was questioned. Mark hesitated before saying, "Sir, I've been working here for 30 years. I've seen many things. But there's one thing I haven't told anyone yet. A patient mysteriously died on the 4th floor of this hospital many years ago. His name was also Martin." A moment of silence fell in the room. Daniel was taken aback. "What are you saying? The same name?" Mark nodded. "Yes, sir. The report of that incident was sealed. It was called a natural death. But I heard that the patient actually disappeared just like today's incident." Daniel narrowed his eyes and looked around. The darkness that had accumulated within the hospital walls seemed to deepen even more, because now it was clear this was not just a missing persons case. This was a repetition of an old history. A shadow from the past. Detective Daniel Harris decided to stay at the hospital that night. Usually, he liked to analyze information with a cool head during an investigation, but the atmosphere of this hospital seemed to overwhelm him in a different way. The night deepened. The corridor on the 4th floor was silent. The faint bit of an oxygen machine somewhere far away, and the rhythmic dripping of water from the damp walls created a terrifying atmosphere. Daniel sat in the hospital archives room, sifting through old documents. From the dust-covered files, some terrible truths slowly emerged. He came across a report from 1987, patient name, Martin Cole, age 39. Status, disappeared. Case closed as natural death under hospital board order. But inside the file was a handwritten note, probably written by an old nurse. "He didn't die." We all saw how the bed suddenly went empty. The lights went out for a few seconds. Then he was no longer there. We were told to keep quiet. Daniel's heart sank. 2 incidents, 2 people, both patients named Martin, and both vanished from the 4th floor. He wondered, was this just a coincidence, or was there some strange secret hidden within the hospital walls? Just then, there was a faint rattling sound from the door behind him. Daniel turned and saw a shadowy figure standing at the end of the corridor, vague like a mist. He turned on his flashlight. As the light hit it, the shadow instantly vanished. A moment of silence. Then suddenly, a faint whisper came from the window pane of the archive room. "He is still here." Goosebumps rose on Daniel's arms. The next morning, he met with Lena again. Lena was exhausted, her eyes red. She said, "Detective, I know this will sound crazy, but last night I had a strange dream. In the dream, I saw Martin reaching out to me, and behind him was the same hospital room, cabin number 407 on the 4th floor." Daniel was startled, because that same cabin, number 407, was where Martin Cole had disappeared in 1987. He requested the hospital management to open that room. At first, everyone refused because the room had been sealed for many years due to unnatural events. But due to police pressure, the door was finally opened. As the door opened, a storm of dust came out from inside. All the furniture in the room was covered with white cloths. The window pane was broken, and there were dark stains on the walls as if some parts had been burned. But the strangest thing was in the middle of the floor. There were faint chalk marks in the shape of a circle, as if some ritual had been performed there a long time ago. Daniel bent down to examine the marks. Just then, Lena suddenly whispered, "This smell, I recognize it. When I found Martin's bed empty last night, it had the same smell, a mixture of old smoke and medicine." Daniel looked up. He felt that the deeper he went, the more an invisible force was pulling him in. And he realized this was not just a case of disappearance, but a long-standing, unsolved curse hidden within the hospital. The mystery of room 407. Standing inside room 407, Detective Daniel Harris felt a strange weight. The room seemed to be breathing. Every wall, every broken pane of glass, every stain seemed to hold an invisible presence. Nurse Emily stood fearfully by the door. She whispered, "Sir, there are many stories about this room. Some say illegal medical experiments used to happen here, while others say they tried to control patients' minds. We knew nurses used to be scared hearing these things." Daniel frowned and shone his flashlight on the marks on the floor. The old circle, drawn with white chalk, was still faintly visible, but clear enough to be understood. Inside it were strange symbols that didn't match any medical science. He bent down and picked up a piece of broken wood. Scratched onto the wood was the phrase, "They never leave." A feeling of deep unease settled in Daniel's chest. Next, he looked for Dr. Howard Lang, a former doctor at the hospital who had worked there in the 80s. The old man now lived alone on the outskirts of the city. When Daniel met him, he was silent at first, but after a little pressure, he slowly began to speak. "If you think this is just a missing persons case, you're wrong, Detective. St. Mary's Hospital has always been a place of dark secrets. In the 80s, some trial programs were conducted here. Strange therapies to alter patients' mental states, hypnosis, electroshock, and even psychedelic drugs were used." He lowered his voice and said, "But with some patients, something else was done. A kind of ritual. They believed there was a door between the human mind and the soul. If that door was opened, people could enter another plane. Maybe they get lost there." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "So you're saying Martin Gray's disappearance is a repetition of a medical experiment?" Dr. Lang sighed. "Maybe. Or maybe someone is still keeping that practice active." Room 407 was never a normal room. Returning to the hospital in the evening, Daniel was examining the room again. Suddenly, Lena came to him, her voice trembling, and said, "I saw Martin again today, in the corridor standing in a white gown. But when I called him, he disappeared." Daniel stopped dead. "Are you sure?" "Yes." His eyes looked strange. They were empty. Just then, a scream was heard from the other end of the corridor. Everyone rushed there. A young patient, Andrew, had suddenly disappeared from his cabin. The door was locked from the inside, but there was nothing inside, only a line drawn in blood on the wall. "Another one has crossed." The nurses began to tremble with fear. Panic spread throughout the hospital. Daniel stood there, a strange determination in his eyes, because now he was sure this disappearance was no accident. It was something planned. Someone was intentionally sending people to the other side. At the first confrontation at night, the atmosphere in the hospital became even heavier. The corridors were dark, with only a light flickering somewhere far away. Nurses and doctors were on duty in a state of panic, many of them applying for leave. But Detective Daniel Harris knew if he backed down now, the truth would remain in darkness forever. He decided to spend the night in room 407. He sat in the room with his flashlight, recorder, and notebook. Lena ignored his request and wanted to stay there as well. "If Martin comes back, I want to see him." Daniel initially didn't agree, but in the end, he gave in to Lena's persistence. It struck 2 a.m. Suddenly, the air in the room turned cold, as if sea air was coming in through the window cracks. The old stains on the walls seemed to slightly stir, and just then an indistinct shadow stood in front of the bed. Slowly, the shadow became clearer, a white hospital gown, a pale face, empty eyes. It was Martin Gray. Lena trembled and screamed, "Martin, it's me, Lena." But Martin didn't react. His lips trembled, but no sound came out. Only his eyes were hollow, plunged into a deep, dark abyss. Daniel bravely took a step forward. "Martin, I am Detective Harris. We're looking for you. Where have you been?" Martin slowly turned his head. There was a strange emptiness in his eyes. Then, in a cold, broken voice, he said, "They took me." Daniel's heart skipped a beat. Who took you?" Martin's lips moved again. "Inside the room beyond the door." Then suddenly, the room light went out. The flashlight also began to flicker. An invisible, muffled sound rose all around, as if hundreds of people were whispering. Lena burst into tears. "Martin, come back to me." For a moment Martin reached out his hand, as if to touch her, but his fingers dissolved into the air, and then the room was empty. Once again, only silence. Daniel let out a breath. He knew this was no ordinary house. Martin was still alive, but trapped on another plane. He noted on his recorder theory, "A ritual is active in room 407 of the hospital that pulls patients into an alternate dimension. This power is still active. Martin Gray is alive, but imprisoned on the other side." He decided there was only one way to end this game: to find that door and bring him back. The final door. Detective Daniel Harris knew there was no turning back now. Room 407 was not just a room, but a door that pulled not a person's body, but their soul to another level. He went to see Dr. Howard Lang again. The old doctor no longer hid anything. Decades ago, some doctors believed there was a point in the human brain where the boundaries of consciousness were weak. They wanted to break that boundary. In room 407, they performed a ritual, a combination of symbols, drugs, and electric shocks. As a result, a few patients disappeared. They didn't actually die, they were trapped in an invisible place. Daniel said in a serious tone, "So they can be brought back, Doctor?" Lang slowly nodded. "It's possible, but dangerous. Once the door is opened, something from the other side might also come over here." The night of the ritual, that very night, Daniel, Lena, and Nurse Emily entered room 407. New lines were drawn around the old circle on the floor, using the old notes provided by Dr. Lang. Silence fell in the room, with only the wind blowing in through the window cracks. Candles were lit. The light flickered. Daniel said in a firm voice, "We have come to bring you back, Martin." Suddenly, the light within the circle began to shimmer. A mist-like vapor spread, and then Martin appeared again, but this time there was a look of agony on his face. He reached out his hand and said in a trembling voice, "Pull me out quickly." Lena rushed and grabbed his hand. "I am here, Martin. Come back to me." Suddenly the whole room shook. Strange black shadows emerged from the walls, as if hundreds of hands were reaching out. In unison, countless voices whispered, "He is ours, let him go." Nurse Emily screamed. The candle lights were on the verge of going out. Daniel took a deep breath and sprinkled salt from his pocket around the circle exactly as written in the notes. For a moment the shadows retreated. Martin's grip tightened. He held on to Lena, trembling. And then, a flash of light. The return. When the light faded, there was no more mist inside the circle. Lying unconscious on the floor was Martin Gray. Lena broke down in tears. Nurse Emily ran over and checked his pulse. "He is alive." Daniel let out a breath. He knew this was not a miracle, but the breaking of a long-standing secret curse. A final word. The next morning, the hospital management sealed off the entire room 407, this time permanently. No patient would ever be kept there again. Martin slowly began to recover. However, he could never describe the details, saying only, "I was in the dark among countless voices. They wouldn't let me go. Only when Lena called me I saw a light. Daniel listened in silence. He wrote the last line in his notebook. Some hospital walls don't just carry history, they carry curses. Saint Mary's is proof of that. Even when patients disappear, maybe they don't actually go anywhere, but are trapped close to us.